Good evening. My name is Nestor Matthews, and I'm a professor at Denison University, and I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's presentation of Blowing Off Steam. Blowing Off Steam is a collaboration among Denison University, the Granville Public Library, and OSU Newark. Tonight, I'm delighted to be joined with Lucy Chin Parker, who has helped us at the Granville Public Library to bring tonight's presentation together. Tonight's presentation is by Genevieve Geisler from the Bluecoats. Bluecoats are a drum corps in Drum Corps International, and this year they came in second place in the highly competitive World Championship for Drum Corps International. Genevieve has been with the Bluecoats for many years. She's currently serving in two roles. She's the Chief Operating Officer, and she's also the Chief Financial Officer. And here tonight, she's going to share with us some of the work that Drum Corps International has been doing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So welcome, Genevieve.
Hi, thank you for having me, Lucy and Nestor. And like they said, I am Genevieve Geisler, and I've been working in the nonprofit sphere for a long time, primarily with the Bluecoats. And so first, I'm just going to introduce myself a little bit and talk about my work with the Bluecoats, and then about my work with our overarching organization, Drum Corps International, on DEI issues in the past few years. So I am not a music major. I didn't come into this working with this musical group, the Bluecoats Drum and Bugle Corps, with any type of music background other than piano lessons as a kid. But I do have a background in a variety of interesting things, some of which are applicable to all the things that we've been working on in the past few years. I went to the University of Michigan, go Blue, and have degrees in history and anthropology and public health. And way back in 2005, I became the second ever full-time employee of the Bluecoats. So we started off as a pretty small organization, starting in 1972. This was our 50th anniversary year this year. But over the course of the past 20 years or so, and especially the last 10 to 15 years, we've gone from being a pretty small nonprofit to sort of a multi-million-dollar organization, traveling all across the country, providing programming for students aged 17 to 22, as well as entertainment for fans across the world. So it's a kind of a niche activity, but it certainly is a part of the greater world when it comes to education and nonprofit space and diversity, equity, and inclusion. I assumed my current role back in 2018, like Nestor said, and I'm currently serving as both the CFO and COO, and I'm also one of the directors of the Bluecoats, managing what happens on the road as we travel and on the field. A little bit more about the Bluecoats. We are a nonprofit music education organization. We provide programs for young people, not small kids, mostly university age, or seniors in high school. You have age 17 to 22. 22 is the oldest that you can be to be in it. We did start out in 1972 as a part of the Canton Police Boys Club, sort of an outreach program for underserved youth. And we have kind of tried to go back to those roots a little bit lately and trying to work with the Enrichment Drumline, a program in Canton that serves students mostly in the Canton City school system with primarily percussion, but also dance and other music and related art education. But our primary focus is our Drum and Bugle Corps, which is you have to try out to be in it. It's a kind of an elite organization. We're one of the very top probably 3 groups in the world out of 25 or more that do this Drum Corps International tour and competition in this marching band show. So it's pretty interesting, and it kind of touches all facets of performance, education, travel, and that kind of thing. I don't think it will work. Our show this year was called Riffs and Revelations. I don't know that it will work on a recording to show the video, but it's sort of I'll show you some photos later. It's there's sort of a multi-sensory interactive dance / music presentation that's hard to explain in words. You have to see it to believe it, I guess you could say. So again, so my work, just a little bit more about my background and what I do here. I'm the co-corps director, and I work obviously with budgeting and financing. We're now we have $6 million in gross receipts, so it's a pretty large organization these days. I also am heavily involved in sponsor relations. We're sort of like the Michael Jordan of marching band. So everything that a student will use in a high school or college marching band, we essentially have sponsors that work with us to provide at a free or reduced cost musical instruments, drumsticks, shoes, marching band uniforms, you name it. So I play a large role in, there's always shuffling around who sponsors whom, and I play a large role in our sponsor relations and securing those items and things like that. We also run a large merchandise operation in which we sell thousands and thousands and thousands of t-shirts like one Nestor's wearing right now, both online and at our shows when we perform in the summer. So that's a big part of our operation. And obviously I work with the CEO to manage the organization itself, with our board of directors on the road, and work with our design and instructional teams, which is about 100 to 125 people who write and teach the show throughout the course of the year, and especially the summer. We also run a charitable bingo, and there's lots of work to do with member finances and paperwork and parents and volunteers. So it's quite a wide ranging job, which is difficult, but what makes it interesting. So here's a little bit of a snapshot, some snapshots of what we do. This is a food truck. We serve our food off a food truck in the summer. This is way back 25 years ago when I started off as a volunteer, but we still serve food off a newer food truck today. This is when those flags in the air are a picture of when we got a chance to perform at the Chinese New Year parade in Hong Kong a couple of years ago, which was a really great experience for our staff and students. This, as Nestor mentioned, this is this picture down here with the crazy uniforms. That was our show this year when we got second place, but we got first place in the percussion caption. So it's kind of cool. And this is our championship year in 2016. And then that was our show from this past year. So what is DCI? And what does any of this have to do with DEI? Well, DCI is sort of like the Major League Baseball of drum corps. So there's all kinds of competing and participating organizations. They're all nonprofits that serve the same age of students, some younger depending on the level of competition, but no older than 22. And they have league rules, and we have competition rules, and we have standards for health, wellness, safety, and most recently getting involved in the DEI space over the past few years in trying to help both DCI as an organization move forward, but also encourage the groups themselves to create more policy programs and just think more about those types of issues. So in addition to my work with the Bluecoats, I also serve as our second representative to the DCI boardroom and serve on several of their committees, including our DEI committee, which I'm the chairperson of, which is called InStep, which is kind of a cute little play on words, but really is a DEI committee. So InStep started out as a Women of DCI committee back in 2018. A few of us had the idea to do it sort of during the very beginning of the Me Too movement and some of the issues that we were actually having. It touched every job and space and place, and there were certainly some issues with some people, well-placed positions within some of our groups that were touched by the Me Too movement. And so we had the idea to try to address these issues more proactively, hopefully in the future, and provide a space to talk about how to promote leadership, participation, and safety for women, both as participants and as staff members and leaders within DCI and its member corps. So that's how we started. But over time, we moved from providing or trying to work to provide these resources and opportunities and policy changes for just women to focusing more on overarching DEI concepts. So in 2020, sadly, Drum Corps and all of our tours were canceled due to the pandemic, but as a sort of silver lining to that, we, with all of the social change and upheaval going on in the United States, we had the time and opportunity to really take the time to think about and respond to how we wanted to approach more effectively diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just for women, but on a broad scale based on race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, et cetera, in the future, both again at the core level and in DCI. So I have a sort of a separate presentation on that here. So as you can see from our mission statement, what InStep became, we petitioned the board of directors to change our charter and to continue our work in a way that was, it would include more different people and hopefully take some of the lessons that we learned from women of DCI and apply them more broadly as a true DEI committee. So, you know, and to work to not only support all of the different communities that we serve by sponsoring events and highlighting accomplishments, but to help people be able to participate, excel, and lead within all of our groups, and also to encourage what was really, still is in some ways, but really encourage more robust and modern policy development, both at the DCI level and in the individual groups, who are all independent and have very different levels of resource access. So in some ways, providing just basic information and basic policy suggestions about everything, you know, from hiring and firing to selecting members and that kind of, and providing basic safety measures. You know, people come at it from a really different array of intellectual knowledge and financial backgrounds. And so by not reinventing the wheel at each of the 25 groups, that's one of our main goals at InStep, to try to make a cohesive, as much as possible, you know, step forward, essentially. So here's just rehashing that resolution. So, you know, basically what we asked DCI member and all of the member corps to agree to was that we all agree that showcasing the diversity that currently exists in the activity is important, and that we also need to work actively, proactively, intentionally to increase diversity at all levels of the activity, and that we also need to advocate for change in policy and action that makes DCI a better, more desirable, and safer experience for everyone. So this is something that we asked all of the drum corps to essentially agree to, or to vote on, and it was not unanimous, but it was almost everyone voted yes. So the idea is to basically fulfill our mission to move DCI forward toward a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive future, and to sort of make those some of the core values of DCI as we move forward, along with education and providing a performance platform for the drum corps. So in doing all of this, we kind of talked about what are some of the issues that we're trying to address as a first step in trying to make change, just to identify, identify the issues and say what our goals might be. And again, a lot of these issues and goals are twofold, because they involve DCI itself, which is in and of itself a nonprofit organization with 25 or 30 employees and a lot of power over all of these organizations and a far larger budget than what we have, in addition to all of the different groups across all of the different states, across all of the different socio-political backgrounds, frankly, and different financial resources. So some of these things are more easily accepted, I suppose, by the community at large than others, but nonetheless, we continue to try to, talk about them and push them through. So our issue here, DCI member corps staffs, a lot of contractors that only work in the summer at every level, from judges to teachers to executives and everything in between, lack racial and gender diversity. So as a goal, staff diversification. Very first step that we suggested was to actually have a real hiring policy, both at the DCI level and at the individual groups, that instead of, we sort of like football, like the NFL, it's like, oh, there's these coaches that keep moving from spot to spot to spot to spot. Same thing happens with a lot of our teaching staff or directors. Instead of looking instead of setting up a hiring process or a portal like might be required at a university, or at least a public university, people just call up and hire someone they know, and then we tend to move in cycles of the people that we know look exactly like us, and we never, even if it's not intentional, we're not doing anything to get outside that to create, to cultivate new talent, find different ideas, and reach different people. So right now we are actually actively at the DCI level searching for a new CEO and CFO. They're both retiring. So I'm interested to see how these newly adopted policies will actually play out. But this is what we have tried to asked for a commitment to at the board level, and it was successful, at least in creating the policy itself, which is certainly a first step. Same with the member corps, as I said. Along the same lines, but a slightly different population, DCI itself and the member corps, since we're all nonprofit organizations, we're technically governed by boards of directors. And because those groups oftentimes lack racial and gender diversity as well, it tends to trickle down, throughout the organization, especially in leadership hiring and in the types of ideas that people are able to bring to the table based on their background. So we asked the board to adopt a board recruitment policy that intentionally requires seeking out a diverse array of qualified candidates, and also posting openings on their website and in other public forums, rather than, again, simply contacting people that they already know. And the same for the member corps. And we also worked as a committee to recruit board members that could be qualified candidates and apply for positions that were open, both at the Bluecoats level. We did this, and at the DCI level, and we were successfully able to get a couple of candidates through by using that method. And then another issue is the same issue, but this time applied to members. So the members of the groups that, again, are young people, a little bit of a different way of approaching it, because you're not hiring anyone, but you're having people try out. And the way that people audition is that they, you can send videos now after the pandemic, but most of the time it's in person, which means you have to have the knowledge and the resources and the training to be able to travel to wherever the audition is, and then to successfully complete the training based on your educational background in marching band. And so obviously, whether it be by the means of funds or the type of marching band program you have at your school, or the remoteness compared to the audition site of your your home, there's all kinds of barriers to all different types of Americans and people around the world, really, because we have people try out from all over to be able to participate. So trying to break those things down is really one of the most difficult tasks that we have, because it's such a multifaceted issue. And of course, it reflects the same issues that we have. It's just a microcosm of the issues that the entire country has in regard to these barriers. It's the same barriers that keep people from necessarily knowing how to, or financially being able to go to an Ivy League school or an elite, an elite university across, So obviously we can't solve all of those things within our marching band nonprofit, but still we try to find ways to address them. So one thing that we've been working on is trying to work on our scholarship programs in a way that doesn't just target people who are already in our systems and already known to be talented or already involved, but rather reaching out proactively to different types of marching bands, for one thing. So historically, Black colleges and universities have incredible marching bands. It's just a different style than DCI. And so we've tried to form some partnerships with some of those universities through some of our instructors, for instance, that work in both places or have experiences in both places to find and recruit talented trumpet players, let's say, but that might not have been interested in doing DCI because it's a totally different style of marching. And, working with people that might be interested to, learn the DCI style of marching that isn't in any way better, but it's just different. So that's something that we've worked on. We've also talked about, a lot of arguments, honestly, but about how would we want to structure a scholarship program. Right now it's like you give money to people that show a need perhaps, or that are already in your system, or we've been trying to say, okay, try to find people that might want to try out but are already self-selecting not to because they know they can't afford it. They're not even coming to auditions. So try to open pathways that way. But it's still very expensive. It's expensive for the students to march drum corps, much like an elite university. It's very expensive if you have to pay the full cost. So a lot of talk around, well, let's lower the cost of the whole thing. But I mean, in my opinion, as running a drum corps for all these years, based on the amenities and the safety issues and the health and wellness and all of the things that we should be providing and now have to provide versus 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, reducing costs isn't really a realistic goal in providing the type of experience that most people want, especially most people want for their children. So I think that something that is a better approach would be to, sort of along the lines of, Harvard and Stanford, where if you have money, it costs more, and if you don't, your commitment to paying is commensurate with your family's wealth or earnings. Because we all, of course, on the other side of the coin, over 50% of our students plop down the whole fee on day one and never think another thing of it. So that we're working to see what one of those, how to kind of approach that as both as individual organizations and as collective as we move forward with working on those scholarship programs, because we have the money to do it at least a little bit right now, because we had some good fortune, I guess you could say, in our access to funding from the federal government after the pandemic. And so that could allow us to use some of those resources to help people, but we just can't quite agree on how to do it. So there you go. And then finally, another really interesting, as we expanded the InStep committee, we expanded it to a lot of different people that hadn't previously been involved in DCI committees. And a couple of those folks brought a really interesting thing I'd never thought about before. I'm not a musician, and I'm, just a little white girl from a small town in Michigan, so, just that the music that's the way that adjudication occurs in DCI, it really favors a specific type of music, and it values some types of music and artistic expression over others based both on the system and the preferences and training of the judges themselves. And so that for instance, there's a very demonstrated instances of devaluing hip hop, for instance, versus Mahler, in a way that probably doesn't, not only isn't fair, but also, perhaps, 18-year-olds have a different taste in music than 72-year-olds. That's something we ought to consider in attracting people about races, ages, ethnicities, genders, whatever, is to be more diverse in our music selection, but also rewarding a more diverse set of musical selections. So I think that's a really interesting avenue to explore. And then another issue that we talked about, and this is one that's been a little bit easier to I guess address initially, is to just do better at collecting data. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can learn how to do this, or find someone that knows how to do it. And as drum corps and as an organization DCI wide, publish the statistics about how we're doing, with data surrounding diversity and socioeconomic impact, and then see how we do in the future, or if anything that we're doing is even working. So some of these things will just rehash what we're talking about, but really what this issue was about is even asking people to talk about some of these issues is an uphill battle. So, the Bluecoats adopted, for instance, an anti-racism policy internally, but asking DCI to do it or asking every corps to do so has not so far been successful. But we have been able to create an example so that people don't have to reinvent the wheel, and they could adopt it at a board level. But I think that for some people without, it's the cart before the horse without reimagining who's on your board and who is your CEO, the willingness to consider or talk about or adopt some of these policies, or even, I guess, believe that improving engagement with different communities is important, has been something that people are coming around to, but even starting at that low level has been, it's a lot of work to talk to people about that. So that's been some of the work that there's no work product really from that for the committee and the committee members, but that's, one of the initial steps that had to be taken. So another issue that sort of surrounds all this is member and constituent safety, in particular students and staff. And this is really going back to the original, some of the original things that the women of DCI was directed out in creating a safer environment for students, same as in colleges and high schools and marching bands and sports and soccer and volleyball and gymnastics. You know, there's been issues over the years in our industry with inappropriate relationships or not creating safe environments for whistleblowing and reporting. And I think this is one of the things that we've done the best job at making more robust and mandating safe sport training, just like the Gymnastics USA, of creating, you know, seasonal or full-time positions at the DCI level and the core level to handle whistleblower reports and to help people, the students and staff, navigate issues, whether they are something that happened during the summer or something that happened to a student before they arrived. We actually, the Bluecoats had a social worker travel with us this summer that was able to really help us deal with some of a lot of the things reported, you know, are not necessarily crimes or anything like that, but rather interpersonal issues that people experience, and certainly revolving around DEI, in that they certainly often involve gender, race, and all the way that that interplays together as a group of people from all across the country comes together. A social worker to just help people navigate those issues, whether they're interpersonal during the summer or you know, things that students are dealing with at home or at college before they came. I think this is probably, hopefully, one of the last ones, but another thing that I think we have been pretty successful at as well is intentionally working to highlight the racial and gender diversity that already does exist within DCI and does exist within the member corps in an intentional way with our media and marketing. And I think that's something that we've actually done a pretty good job with. We had some marketing volunteers from one of the corps out in California that you know, like their real job was at Facebook or whatever, and they were able to provide us with a lot of provide DCI and the member corps with a lot of templates that allow people to be better about you know, marking holidays on their social media and highlighting not just the people that you see and notice, but everybody in your organization and things like that. I think that's been pretty successful. And I know, like, as a woman, or I have daughters, like just seeing people, like when they show a video of a girl in the snare line drumming, that really is inspiring to people. And I think it can help feed creating future diversity amongst the groups and amongst fans if we continue to, you know, work hard on this aspect. Some of this is a little bit outdated. So I think my last slide is just some of the people that contributed to all of this. And as you can see, we kind of worked toward having, this is during the pandemic, so it's all on Zoom, of course, but we, you know, have a hugely different group of people working on all of these issues than we did when we started out with just the women of DCI. So that was something that was really exciting. A lot of new voices that contributed a lot of the, contributed a lot to this slideshow with their ideas and what they thought the issues were in DCI as we identified them and created goals. So finally, I just want to talk a little bit, and I've touched on it some, how all of this applies to Bluecoats. We created our own committee called DIAC, but essentially a DEI committee. We have open hiring practices. All of our jobs are posted online, and anyone can apply. And we have had some random people, not random, but, you know, we have had people that were not in our circle, you know, get jobs and be successful since then. So I think that's been pretty successful. I know it's a really basic thing, but for small nonprofit organizations, it was a big step, I think. Same with the board of directors. We have been issuing a diversity and socioeconomic impact reports each year. We did adopt an anti-racism policy, and we do offer an HBCU full scholarship for one student each year, and some opportunities to audition for free as well. So I think that's been a pretty cool partnership through some of our instructors that either currently or in the past have been band directors at HBCUs across the country. And then finally, something that's not listed as a point on here because I made this slideshow a while ago, I think the most wildly successful thing that we have done at the Bluecoats is that in 2022, we did a pilot program called the Bluecoats Fellowship, in which we opened applications to people to submit samples of their work along with an application to have the opportunity to work one-on-one and travel with us for a couple of weeks at spring training and be paired with one of our designers. So people that are interested in writing music or creating drill or being a drum corps or marching band administrator or choreographing color guard, people had the opportunity to apply for these positions. And then first, they received the people who won the fellowship received a small stipend and their travel covered to come stay with us for a couple of weeks at our new spring training site in Indiana. Unfortunately, not Denison, but we had about 70 applicants and we had 7 people that were selected for the program. And we funded it ourselves, the Bluecoats, but we're hoping to, we're doing a presentation in January to the full DCI collective in the hopes of perhaps spreading it to other groups, but also maybe getting some funding from DCI for groups to be able to implement it. You certainly could do it with 1 or 2 people. But each fellow was able to interact one-on-one with their designer in several scenarios, also watch rehearsal, ask questions, work together on creating a little program. And the idea, was to serve people who might not have had an opportunity to get a job in drum corps because they don't have the right connections or they never marched drum corps because they didn't have the money, and help them, gain those connections by working with some of the top designers in the activity. And most of the designers do marching band as a full-time career. So they write music for, 10, 15, maybe even more, college and high school marching bands plus a drum corps. So it's a real job that people have, believe it or not, and a lot of, anyway, a lot of people were interested and we were able to have those 7 people and we're doing it again this year. And I think it was just wildly successful. We had, we've already had a couple, been able to, through our references, place a couple of the folks with other drum corps that they applied for like a real job with the drum corps this summer. One became a teacher at Indianapolis Public Schools and is already, on her own, but is already working with one of our other band directors, or one of our other designers who's a fine arts director for a school district in Avon, elsewhere, in the Indianapolis area, to partner on bringing her inner city band to their big band shows, and that's already in progress. So I think it's been a pretty cool program, and I think it was really rewarding for the students and the Bluecoats designers as well to see how we can get, maybe the next John Vanderkoff, which is our drill designer. Maybe the next John Vanderkoff is out there, but we don't even know them because they never had the opportunity to march drum corps or get one of these jobs. So finally, this is just some resources, that I used to create this slideshow. Our Marching Counts is an affinity group for Black people who have been involved mostly in DCI, but also other marching arts organizations like WGI and BOA, and then the InStep committee information and some of the policies and reports that I mentioned in the presentation as well. So that's really all I have. So thank you for having me here, and I will stop sharing my screen now.
Genevieve, thank you. That was fantastic. It's so exciting to see all the different things that you're engaged in, and at so many levels. You've got the DCI level, and of course, you've got the Bluecoats level. Earlier, just before we got on, and just before we started our recording this evening, I congratulated Genevieve and the Bluecoats on their tremendous success this year. They had a really great run. I neglected at the time to make 2 other congratulations, and that was that this is the 50th anniversary for the Bluecoats. So happy 50th to the Bluecoats and happy 50th to DCI. Both were started in 1972. And it's interesting to reflect on how things have changed since 1972. And I think that your presentation tonight highlights some of the very recent changes that are just so exciting. So thank you for that. I think one of the themes that stuck with me, because I know that on one of your slides, you showed that DCI and the Bluecoats are 501c3 organizations. Many of our viewers who will be watching this won't know what that means, but it's a special kind of tax designation that's reserved for educational nonprofits. So many universities, I'm sure the HBCUs, or the historically Black colleges and universities that you've been working with, are all 501c3. And I think what we all have in common is that we're all really human development organizations. And we do that in different ways. So I found your fellowship to be so exciting, because I always think of the Bluecoats as having such spectacular performers, and they do, but there's a small army behind them, or sometimes not such a small army behind them. And the idea that now we can expand the fellowship so that you can bring some folks in who might not have been in otherwise, and they're going on to get positions as teachers in Indianapolis or wherever. This is really a great way to broaden access to all the things that Drum Corps has to offer. So exciting.
Yeah, that's the hope anyhow. So
And I can appreciate the challenges. There are cultural challenges. People have been doing things sometimes for decades, and change might not be obvious to them, or the need for it might not be obvious. There are financial challenges. The enterprise is performing at such a high level, and I realize that takes financial resources. So I can see why maybe not everybody has access, because first you have to practice a lot of hours for a lot of years before you would become competitive to play at the level that the Bluecoats do, and that's often a family resource issue, right? Not all families can support their kids to that level for reasons completely beyond their control. And so it's nice that we have opportunities to include folks through something like InStep or DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion that you've got going on. I was thinking, now that you're working with some colleges on a regular basis, I wondered if one other possible source of income might be if you were to partner with the university and have the university co-author with DCI grants that come from the Carnegie Foundation or the Mellon Foundation, maybe the National Endowment for the Arts, that kind of a thing. There might be some way to get some dollars into DCI. Of course, grant writing is its own project.
yeah.
And it's a real skill. And so I can imagine that we don't just happen to have grant writers floating around, but
Right.
something like that. Yeah, right.
Yes, perhaps. Yes, certainly DCI has kind of looked at a couple of those things. And one thing they found is that we need better data on the people that we already are serving. So that's part of what we're trying to work for as well. A lot of the drum corps, and some still are this way, that are smaller, but mostly not. We all started off as like in 1972 as teaching. We taught kids to, not we, but like they taught kids to play instruments. They found them. They needed, they were getting in trouble after school, and they taught them to play the trumpet. And that was what they did. Now we don't teach anyone to play the trumpet anymore. We take people that are like really good at trumpet and make them like a little bit better. So, it's certainly been a phase shift in how that has worked. And now we're all trying to look back and say, okay, we're supposed to be, we're a nonprofit organization, but how can we serve not just these 165 students each year, of which, a large percentage, let's face it, already have a lot of advantages. So.
Right. Yeah. I was also very excited to hear, and somehow I missed it. I tried to stay tuned in to DCI and certainly into the Bluecoats. And so this was really exciting that you had the chance to, if I understood that correctly, you got to travel to China with the group?
Yes, twice. So in 28, well, it would have been the very beginning of 2019. And then I think it was in the very beginning of 2017 or 16. We got to go to Hong Kong with a small group of 30 or 40 people and perform a little bit of our sort of like a little bit of the show with a little bit of drill, and then a little bit of marching music, and then you perform on a stage in the Chinese New Year parade in Hong Kong, which is like a huge giant event, with millions of people watching on TV and all kinds of things like that. So, the students, and staff, heck, I loved it. But we got to stay there we got to stay in Hong Kong for about a week, and because you have to practice and go through, it's all hugely, on like the biggest network television thing. So you have to go through like all these really complicated and well orchestrated rehearsals and things like that, so yeah, and they take you sightseeing and all that kind of thing. So it was pretty cool. Yeah.
What an experience for the young people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm sure it would be a great experience for all of us. And I have heard through many friends that I have in drum corps that the phenomena of drum corps as it's practiced here through DCI is a predominantly American kind of art form. Now I know that we get wonderful performers. Some of them were in my psychology experiments when you were, so they're from all over the world, but predominantly they're from the U.S.
Yes,
And I
and
think
drum corps is very popular also in Japan. It's slightly
Oh,
different.
okay.
It's slightly different because it's all indoors in like arena type things rather than outdoors. Obviously, American football, not a million American football fields in Japan, but a lot of the designers of American drum corps shows work in Japan as well. And there are a lot of student, and marching band is also very popular in a similar way. And a lot of, every year we get probably 4 to 8 students just in the Bluecoats alone from Japan. So a few other countries too, Western Europe, Canada, once in a while, Taiwan. But
Okay.
primarily most of our students who are not American are from Japan.
Yeah, that's great. I remember having some students from Japan when you were at Denison. It
Yes.
was a delight to have them. Just it's so much fun to have. It's nice to see it expanding. And that's something, one of the many ways it's changed since 1972. I might guess.
Yeah.
And it's just getting better in that direction, which is really, really great to see. So happy about all of that. I don't know if you have any other parting thoughts before we sign off for the evening. We're so grateful that you would spend some time with us and share with us the many exciting things that are going on in DCI.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. And I hope that, maybe in a couple years, I'll have some more better, even better updates about the things that we've been working on. Because now we have a lot of ideas, but now we have to make sure we continue to implement them over time and see what the results are, I guess. So.
Great. Okay, well, thank you again. And congratulations one more time to DCI and to the Bluecoats on a great year and on the 50th anniversary.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay,